welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group, and it's election season, so we have another special episode. I want to remind you during election season, we don't run the news, so we have more time for interviews. Now, you've already seen our three select board candidates for one seat. You've seen our five library trustee candidates for four seats. And now we are in the school committee part of the interview process where there are six candidates for three seats. Of course, the election is Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. There is also early voting both in person at Putterham Library, at the Coolidge Corner Library, and at the Brookline Town Hall. There is voting by mail. You can also receive your ballot by mail and drop it in a drop box in any of those three locations 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of different options on how you go ahead and vote. You can use your favorite search engine to look up the details. I don't have time to get into all of that today, but I do want to remind you the election is Tuesday, May 6th. There are competitive races for select board, library trustee, school committee, and most, although not all, town meeting precincts, right? So there's a lot for you to chew on, a lot for you to think about. And we're very lucky today. We have school committee candidate Akiva Leibowitz. Akiva, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, we've been doing these. I know you've been doing a lot of forums. I've been doing a lot of interviews, and it doesn't get old for me. I love this stuff. Akiva, why don't you start by, telling us about yourself a little bit. What have you been doing your whole life?
So I'm a physician, a critical care physician at Beth Israel Medical Center. I've been there for the past now already almost 11 years. So which is the span of my residency in Brookline. So I've been in Brookline for almost 11 years. I'm an anesthesiologist, critical care physician. That's my vocation. That's my day job. But I do have a deep interest and passion towards education. In what you would say my previous life, or previously when we were living in Israel or Palestine, Israel, when our children reached schooling age, preschool age, we and a few friends who were very much concerned about education created a unique bilingual, equitable, or one of the only equitable bilingual educational frameworks for Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel, in which there was full equality and equilibrium both in the content, curriculum, student and teacher bodies, and culture and language. And that I was chair of the board of this organization, which established this school, which is almost 20 years ago, and school continues to thrive to this day. So I've nurtured it and created and nurtured it for many years till I moved over here. And that's where I gained a lot of experience and knowledge and ability to see how one might make an educational system with many constraints, both financial, political, ideological constraints from many different sides, and actually make it work. So it is this interest and passion with education which brought me over the years here to be involved. And particularly over the past few years, I've had rising concerns about the freedom and autonomy our educators have in their field of expertise, which is education. And I've been involved in various instances in trying to help out with that.
So you have a background in sort of creating and operating a school, at least in some sense. Why run for school committee in Brookline and why now? Why is this the moment for you?
So I have four children. Two of them graduated BHS. One is a current student at BHS, and one is a prospective student for BHS. And every child is unique and has their own needs and directions, etc. But overall, we were both me and my wife were amazed by the involvement, the caring, the emotional intelligence, the creativity, the devotion of the educators to our children, and we've seen that all around. And aside from giving shout outs, which are important, I felt it's an important time to step in and try and stand up for what they're doing. Over the past 2 years, I think their work has become more difficult in that aspect, with a lot of pressures trying to control how they conduct their educational process. And at this current moment in our country, where we have uh, an administration of hooligans in Washington who are trying to impose tyranny and an authoritarian regime in this country, they are targeting educational systems because they understand that good critical education uh, is where the authoritarian regimes will fail, and they're trying to dismantle them. So they've been putting a lot of effort into the higher education. But if you look at New York Times a couple of days ago had a headline noting that the next target is the K-12 system. And in order to be able to counteract these pressures, which are coming from the outside, and they may have also supporters from the inside, there needs to be a strong uh, body within our town government, which will be able to stand up to this authoritarian regime, which will undoubtedly try to control very important aspects of our educational system. They've started already, and they're starting with those local governments which are highly dependent on them. So luckily, Brookline is not as dependent as other communities around us, which are dependent on federal funds more dearly, but they will find a way to reach us.
So to my knowledge, well, certainly you're the first candidate on my show to really draw a very specific connection between the Trump administration and local government. And uh, it sounds like you're not just concerned about the money, but about more than that. Certainly, the money is a concern on its own. But am I right that it sounds like there's more than just the money at stake here in your mind for our schools? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the government has been, I don't know, you would say clever, but they've been using a lot of pretense and indirect, or they've been weaponizing different tools to counteract educational systems, particularly the higher education. Uh, Eventually, the on the ground tool would be money. I mean, they use money as their sort of how to execute their plan. So, and we've seen some higher education institutions capitulate to these attempted interventions. We've seen other higher institutions which have, at the last moment, risen to the moment and stood up against them. And I think we would need to have that sort of uh, spirit within our system. So it can come in many different forms, right? There can be and that's not it's not a secret, right? They're demanding that educational elements that deal with equity and diversity be removed from the curriculum. They may follow up on that. They have been actively working against transgender youth. These are all these are all actions which are going to be very real here soon. And I want to be there and have my be at the seat when we have to figure out how do we work against that.
I want to pivot to the budget simply because I don't want to run out of time on it. It's been in the news quite a bit. I'm talking specifically about the school budget and the budget gap, which is the difference between sort of where the public schools expect to be funded and the money they would need to do all the things that they've got programmed or want to do. And over the past weeks, that budget gap has gotten smaller, mostly because the ask has gotten smaller. It looks like the bottom line, the amount of money going into the schools, will go up a few $100,000 thanks to a more generous state budget than had been predicted. But that's also TBD. How do you feel that, in terms of process, this dealing with the budget gap has gone so far? And what are your thoughts on how you would do things a little differently?
So there's been a lot of discussion on bridging the budget gap, and this is not new. This has been discussed in the previous budget year, and it sort of has been a common thread over several years. I think one aspect that is left aside and people don't talk about, and I don't know how many people know about that. If you look at the percentage from the general town budget spent on education over the past 5 years, you'll find an astonishing finding. In 2020, our town budgeted 43.8% of the budget towards education. And in fiscal year of 2024, we are budgeting 41.1% of our total budget to education. So we have a 2.6% decline in what we budget for education. If we want to look at this comparatively, you can see that the percentage of the general funds spent on education in our region, we rank 16. So, I mean, we have Waltham, Bedford, Natick, Arlington, Newton. They all they all allocate a much greater percentage of their general fund for education. I mean, I just got this in North Andover. They spend 54% of their budget on education. In Brookline, we spend 41%. So I think the idea I'm trying to say is rather than focusing on how to bridge the gap, we should be focusing on how do we fully fund an educational system. If you want an educational system to thrive, and education is probably the single most important investment local government can make. Obviously, there are other important things local government has to deal with, but the single most important, which affects the town in so many different ways, then we have to be fighting not for how to bridge the budget, although yes, budget has to be made responsibly, and we have to revise it, and there needs to be oversight. All those issues, all those concerns are in place. But the major thing is how do we fully fund our educational system? And if we want our educational system to grow, to thrive, to improve, we want to attract the best teachers. We want to provide opportunities for those who may need more. That is for students who require special education, or we want to invest in equity initiatives, or we want to provide additional challenges for those who are excelling. All these cost money, and we have to invest in that. And I'd like to see the conversation pivot towards that rather than the nitty-gritty numbers of how to bridge a gap which shouldn't be there in the first place.
Well, let's pivot now at least a little bit. If Brookline were to increase the percentage of budget being spent toward education. One way is to raise additional revenue and allocate it toward education. That is to say, raise taxes on someone. Another way would be to cut spending on non-educational items and move those dollars over to the education budget. Maybe there's a third way that I'm not thinking of, but if those are the options, right? Raise taxes, change the way we spend, or a third way that I'm not clever enough to have thought of, how do we get there? What would you suggest Brookline do to increase the percentage of money it spends on education?
So I mean that's a timely question. I do have ideas of my own, but I think that's the question that needs to be rolled over to the town meeting and the select board and the town administration. So we as a school committee needs to fight for being funded fully. It is on the town to figure out what the process of increasing, whether it would be increasing revenue or making cuts in other departments, that's on the town. It has to be a discussion that has to be made, right? It's not an easy discussion. I've heard several of the select board candidates speaking about their ideas of how to increase town revenue in different ways. And I mean, while I have some ideas of my own, I don't think that's my role as a school committee member to to put my foot where those decisions are made. Although I mean, we can be consulted, obviously. Um, so I mean, to be realistically, I think that the answer is somewhere a combination of all three options you mentioned. I mean, it would probably have to there would be and there's no way to avoid that. I mean, inflation is skyrocketing. So the compensation for our educators has to has to accommodate that. Education costs more. Will we have to increase the revenue by taxes? Probably. I mean, nobody puts that as their running platform for office, but there'll probably be some element of that in some way. There'll probably be some element of cuts in other departments, and the third option of introducing innovative ideas of increasing revenue aside from collecting that from taxes, that's a whole area which I think our town needs to be thoughtful of and discuss.
So let's move sort of away from the money and into the classrooms. Uh, it's funny, this race hasn't had a lot of conversation about pedagogy. But I think, uh, my show offers the opportunity to do lots of things, including let's talk about it. Who should be determining pedagogy and how, what's that process from school committee or town all the way into the brains of our young people with respect to pedagogy? How are those determinations made and how should they be made?
So I think a common misconception is of the role of school committee in pedagogy. The role of school committee is to hire the the professionals, the superintendent, and by way of superintendent, the principals and teachers, etc., who are the ultimate authority or professional authority for how they conduct their pedagogy. And we need to trust them. They know what they're doing, and obviously there should be always dialogue and conversation, but this notion that there is an overarching board of non-professionals who should dictate or control what is being taught, how it is being taught, what is being said in class, what sort of expression is being uh, expressed within the education system. I think that's a flawed notion. I would like to empower our educators. They know how to, that's their profession. They know how to work with these youngsters and help them in developing their ways of critical thinking. It's true, it's not their role to teach them what to think, but their role is helping them, get the tools to become critical thinkers, and how to use them wisely in critical thinking. I mean, we need to keep in mind that academic excellence is not solely achievements, right? Not academic achievements. So, I mean, excellence includes having free thinking children, youngsters who would become curious citizens of the world around them, youngsters who become involved in social matters, uh, youngsters who are trying to make the world as inclusive as they can. This is all part of academic of educational excellence. So it's not only about the grades, and that's a long process, and it has to be done with the autonomy to actually work with that, work within the framework with the between the educators and the students. I've noticed, or we've seen over the past 2 years, attempts of various powerful groups to try and control what is being said within the frameworks of our educational system. It's come up to the school committee several times, and I'm I'm happy. I was happy to see that eventually the educators did, despite all the pressures, were able to carry out many of their educational endeavors and allow free speech within the school, and allow speech which may have been uncomfortable for some. That talk has occurred and happened within the educational framework. I am very worried that in the 4 years to come, this ability to protect this element will erode.
Now, I think I know in a bit more detail of what you refer. I'm afraid many of my viewers do not. Many people who vote in school committee races haven't had children in the schools in years or perhaps ever. And so they may not have kind of a feel for what you're talking about. Can we talk a little bit more about free expression amongst teachers and amongst students within the school, and where those tensions are, and maybe your view on either where we ought to land or how to move forward? Put a little meat on the bones there.
Yeah, I mean, these are examples. So I mean, the probably the most vocal example is what occurred in the past day of racial recognition in the high school, where a student and this is a day which is organized by the educational staff every year, which they set aside time to discuss issues of racial justice and social issues. And there was one Palestinian youngster who uh, gave or was intending to give a talk about his experiences, and uh, uh, that speech there was a fierce attempt to try and shut that speech down, to stifle those voices. Now, regardless of what your opinion about his ideas or feelings are, this is an educational endeavor which was curated and organized and carried out and mentored by a core of dedicated educators who worked on making this happen. Um, and they found this speech relevant and important to be included in in the day's curriculum. And despite that, there was an immense effort from which people within the town and from out of the town tried to twist the school's arms into canceling that day due to this speech. And I felt it was very, very important to allow those voices, the students' voices, to be heard, not necessarily, or not only, or not because I agree or disagree with what is being said, but because it's in the purview of the educators to decide and to work on these educational activities with the students. It's not and there's no role for these external pressures, and we should trust them in their ability to navigate these difficult discussions, and enable them to let students express themselves fully and freely.
Thank you for that. We're almost out of time, but I do want to give the opportunity. You've got a website?
We have a website, Akiva for Brookline.
And that's the number 4? Or the word 4?
No, it's a word for.
Okay. Akiva, Akiva,
Akiva for Brookline.
For Brookline. And folks can go there and learn a little more about you and your vision and your endorsements and that sort of thing. Akiva, I really appreciate you taking some time with us here on Brookline Interactive Group. I know a lot of the forums, they're snippets of answers. I like this format. In addition to that, to allow a little bit of a longer form, folks can go to the website. They can go to the League of Women Voters. There's a variety of sources where folks can learn about all 6 candidates for school committee, all 3 candidates for select board, all 5 candidates for library trustee, as well as, if you look a little harder, some information about town meeting members. Folks, the election is Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you can, I encourage you to vote. Not everybody can vote because of age, because of nationality. You can always participate in an election. If you are here lawfully and you're 18 years old, you can make a contribution. Anybody can help a candidate by knocking on doors or talking to friends and neighbors or getting the word out. So I encourage everybody to be involved in our elections, whether or not you support today's guest, Akiva Leibowitz, or anyone else. It's really important that we all get involved. So Akiva, thanks so much for coming on the show. Folks, thanks for watching Brookline Interactive Group. You've been watching TV on TV. And, when this election season gets over, we'll get back to our regular programming. But I've really enjoyed these interviews. I hope you have too. And, I hope you'll stay tuned. Akiva, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. And we'll see you May 6th at the elections.
We'll see you then.
Yep.
All right, everyone. You have a great day and tune in next time.